Love lives here.
How are we doing this morning? Thanks for coming out in the rain, which I feel like I'm a little competing with at the moment. It's a good thing we're in here and not out there. So I'm going to tell a story about Noah, I think. I have a complicated relationship with the rain because I used to love the rain until I became a teacher. And now I love the rain as long as it happens on the weekend, because it makes my day much more complicated when it happens during the day, during the week. So speaking of that, I heard a story from this teacher that was trying to teach her class about idioms. Right, so idioms are those things, I can't help it, sorry, I'm a teacher. Idioms are those things that we say that don't really make sense unless you kind of know what they mean, like let the cat out of the bag, right? That's an idiom. So she was trying to teach her class about idioms, and she said, what about the weather? If it rains cats and dogs, what do you have? And a student raised his hand and said, a lot of poodles. So thanks for stepping up over all those poodles to get here today. And as a teacher, one of the things I notice is that at the beginning of the school year, that we don't spend a lot of time teaching, right? We spend a lot of time building that community and building that structure. We talked about students, how the room works, where they fit, what's expected. And we try to create that community of learning, that community of care, and hopefully everybody feels safe and welcome. The classroom can be full of supplies, it can be decorated, it can have the world's greatest teacher, but in order for learning to happen, the room has to become something more than just the walls. It has to become a community, a kind of shelter. Not shelter as an escape, but shelter as a community of care. We try to create that place where mistakes can happen, where learning can happen, a place where questions are welcome, a place where we can fail, regroup, and try again, and a place where they begin to trust that they have the right to be there and they don't have to earn the right to be there. It's one of my favorite phrases as a teacher that I learned a few years ago. Rather than telling a kid, hey, stop that, right? I just say, try again. Nope, try again. And in that sense, a teacher is always building more than lessons. We're shaping the environment. We're helping create a pattern. We are, in a way, drawing a blueprint for what the room will hold. And I think, as I get older, I realize how much that is like spiritual community. It's not that different. And I want you to know that I'm talking a lot today about community, but I also believe that spiritual principles work on lots of different levels. So the same principles that I'm talking about community today also apply to us individually, because we're all a community of people inside of us, right? And we're all a community on a world level and on a national level. Because we want to create that community of care, because every one of us walks into a community carrying something. Today it might have been an umbrella. But some people walk in carrying grief. Some walk in carrying loneliness, fatigue, joy. Some carry joy that needs somewhere to overflow. Some carry a quiet question that they may not have words for yet. Some people come in asking that question, is there a place for me here? So when I heard this month's theme and the talk title, Blueprint of Belonging, I think it's more than a clever phrase. It's a spiritual question. What are we building from? What is the pattern beneath the structure? What gets included in the design and what gets left out? what is this community built to hold? And I think that we all need a place we can enter and breathe and rest and belong. You see, community is built with intention. It's not built by accident. It has to be architected, if that's a word, and maintained. So we have to design it for inclusion so that no one is left out, and we build what Spirit reveals together. And that applies not only as a spiritual community, or as a state community, or as a family community, or as an individual community. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, said, "We are bound together in the unity of God and cannot escape this unity." We are bound together in the unity of God and cannot escape this unity. But unity also doesn't mean conformity. We are not separate beings trying desperately to become spiritually connected. We are already expressions of the one life. We don't have to struggle. We don't have to do anything to get there. We just have to realize it and remember it. Ernest Holmes says that we cannot escape the creative power of our thoughts, but he also writes that idea of separation as a condition, it's a condition of consciousness, not ultimate reality. That means belonging at its deepest level is not something that we have to manufacture. It's not something that we have to force. It's something that we have to awaken to. It is something we give form to. But if that's true, then why do so many people still feel left out in the world? Why do so many of us know oneness in theory, but struggle with belonging in practice? Because I think that's true for most of us, at least some of the time. I think one answer is that there's a difference between spiritual truth and human structure, and we're trying to reflect that spiritual truth. And that's where the blueprint comes in. A blueprint is not the building. It is the underlying design that determines what will eventually be built. It shows where the openings are. It shows where the walls are. It shows what the structure is meant to hold, how people are meant to move through it, where there is access, where is there support, where is the weight carried, and where is there room. That's what the blueprints tell us. So when we say a blueprint of belonging, what we're really talking about, of course, is consciousness. When we talk about our consciousness, what we're talking about is the blueprint of our lives, of our community, of the world. And we know that that consciousness is creative. What we consistently hold in thought, feeling, expectation, attention, and belief becomes the mold, it becomes the plan, it becomes the blueprint for our lives. That's not only true as a community, but it's true individually. So if you don't take anything else away from this today, I want you to hear this. The pattern of consciousness becomes the pattern of life. The pattern of consciousness becomes the pattern in the room. The pattern of consciousness becomes the pattern of community. So if we want to know what the real blueprint of life or of a community, we can not only look at the brochures and the mission statements, or even our best intentions. We have to look at the pattern. What do we consistently pay attention to? What do you consistently pay attention to? What do we make room for? What do we reward? who gets seen? Who gets missed? Who feels relaxed in this space? And again, I want to emphasize this isn't just about community. This is also about our lives. In our lives, who gets seen? Who gets missed? Who feels safe around us? That's the blueprint. That's our consciousness. And this month, we've been talking about a book by Adrienne Marie Brown, and she wrote a book called The Emergent Strategies. And in that book, she says that the small patterns that we practice become the larger structures we live in. Does this sound familiar? She says, small is good, small is all. The large is a reflection of the small. Of course, Ernest Holmes would just say that we are the microcosm of the macrocosm. Makes a lot more sense when we just say the large is the reflection of the small. You know, Ernest Holmes loves his words. She also says, what you pay attention to grows. What you rehearse becomes the structure of your life and your community. What you normalize becomes the environment. And what you practice in small ways becomes the architecture of the whole. If in my classroom I only focus on order and compliance, I may create a classroom that looks calm, but also might feel anxious. If I pay attention to curiosity, encouragement, and recovery after mistakes, it's the same desks, the same walls, but a completely different blueprint. The tone of the greeting matters. Whether newcomers are noticed matters. Whether long-term members make space for new people matters. Whether the room feels cliquish or open. Whether people can be honest. And whether disagreement is okay. Okay to disagree. These seem like small things, but small is not trivial. Small becomes large. The things we do on a small level become the building, become the pattern, become the blueprint that we live from. Belonging is not the same thing as friendliness. Belonging is not the same thing as friendliness. A place can be friendly and still be hard to enter. A place can be polite but still be full of barriers. And that brings me to something I think is my big essential point today, is that community is not only about gathering people, it's about removing barriers. And again, not just here, but also in our lives and in the world. We want to remove barriers to being welcome. Removing barriers to honesty, removing barriers to participation, removing barriers to dignity, removing barriers to rest, removing barriers to healing, removing barriers to spiritual growth. One of the jobs of spiritual community is to remove what keeps the truth from being more deeply lived and experienced. The author Brene Brown gives us very useful language here. She writes, "True belonging never asks us to change who we are." True belonging never asks us to change who we are. It requires us to be who we are. She describes connection as what happens when people feel seen, heard, and valued. Fitting in says to become acceptable. Belonging says bring your authentic self. Fitting in says learn the code. Learn how things are done. Belonging says, the room is becoming more human because you are here. Fitting in says, do not disrupt us. Belonging says, your presence matters and we are willing to grow because you are part of the whole. As a spiritual community, we want to be careful that we're not just rewarding sameness. It cannot say all are welcome, but quietly mean as long as you learn how to be like us quickly. Especially in our philosophy, that it can be full of language and jargon. It has to ask harder and deeper questions. What are the unspoken barriers? What insider language are we using without noticing? What assumptions are we making about class and age and culture and background and education, extroversion? What would make it easier for someone to enter into this room or our lives as they are? Remember, belonging means never having to change who you are. What would make it easier for someone new to participate? What would make it easier for someone uncertain to know what to do and not do in the community? Those are blueprint questions. Jesus taught in the Christian Bible a parable about two builders. One builds a house on rock and the other builds a house on sand. And for a while, both houses are fine. And then the weather happens. Rain, floods, and winds. And the house built on sand collapses, while the house built on rock stands firm. That's not just a spiritual metaphor, that's also about our consciousness. Where do we build our consciousness? Because we all experience weather. Families have weather, communities have weather, countries have weather. How many of you have been experiencing a little weather lately? Human hearts have weather. And when we have those moments of weather in our lives, we need a shelter. And a shelter is not tested on a sunny day. A shelter and a community is tested when the winds rise and the rain comes. So what is the foundation of our consciousness? A house with no foundation may go up quickly, but it will not shelter anyone for long. That foundation is trust, consistency, listening, repair, truthfulness. People learning that they can show up and still be held in love. This week I was thinking of, with my class, we've been watching the Artemis II astronauts. How many of you watched the splashdown the other day? I love that they were talking about how unifying the space program is. I was listening to Dr. Mae Jemison. She was talking about the role that the space program has, not just to improve technology and not just to go places we haven't been, but it brings the whole country together. And what struck me is this, is like safe return. They came back. It didn't just happen by accident. It happened because of design. A spacecraft built to hold human life. A lot of math and trajectory designed to bring them home. And a support team to receive them. If you watched the splashdown, you saw all the Navy and the medics and all the people that were there to welcome them back and support them. That's what spiritual community can be. It's not just a random collection of people in the same room, but a consciously created structure of care. A place to hold real life. Because a lot of us experience weather. Tired of performing, tired of proving, tired of pretending, tired of being misunderstood, tired of the drama and the division. But as a community, we become the re-entry point. What if community, spiritual community, became a place where the atmosphere itself was shaped by compassion? What if it's a place where people could come in from the weather of the world and remember who they are? That is our spiritual architecture. That's our blueprint of belonging. And we have our spiritual practices to help us build this way, right? We have affirmative prayer that reminds us of the truth of appearances. We have meditation that lets the mud in the water settle and lets our mind settle so that we can see the patterns that we are living from. Our minds can be like that too. Affirmation helps us redraw the blueprint of our consciousness. Visioning asks not only what do we want, but what is Spirit already revealing here? That is what makes a spiritual community together. Together, that word matters because not one person builds the whole house. Not one person carries the whole structure. Not one person creates belonging for everyone else. You do it together. You do it with attention, with language, with a willingness to grow, with a courage to remove barriers. So, as a spiritual community, what kind of shelter are you helping shape? Because belonging is not something we wait around to feel. It's something that we help build by what we include, what we bless, what we challenge, what we're willing to repair, what we're willing to make room for. If the divine pattern is oneness, then our work is to shape lives and communities that reflect that truth more clearly. So maybe the practice this week is simple. Invite someone new to coffee or conversation. Notice someone who may be standing at the edge. Make one act of welcome more intentional. Look for barriers that you can help remove, because small patterns matter. They become the larger structures we live inside. And let us remember together that we help build a community and a world and a state and a city where everyone belongs. And so it is. So as you move over to the tables for our time of community discussion, what does belonging feel like to you? When have you felt most included here? What can we add or change to strengthen belonging? And maybe I would add or change that to what barriers exist as a community that we could help remove. All right, I will see you back in a couple of minutes. All right, as we close out our sacred community this morning, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes if you're willing as we enter into that spiritual practice of affirmative prayer. Starting always with that idea that there is only one power, one principle, one infinite presence, one creative intelligence through which everything lives, moves, has its being, and is created. There is only one power. It is a power of love, of grace, of wisdom, of peace, of divine right order and divine right action. That is the nature of things. And it is my nature and it is your nature. It is who and what we are this morning. It is simply our job to remove any barriers to that awareness. And so I speak my word for each one of us this morning and to about every single person within the sound of my voice, knowing that wherever there is a barrier to love, it is removed. Wherever there is a barrier to wholeness, it is removed. Wherever there is a barrier for abundance or peace, it is removed. Right here and right now, as we recognize our oneness with the divine, we know, we claim, we see that all barriers to love and peace, not only in ourselves but in the world, dissolved back into the nothingness from which they came. And so in great gratitude, I give thanks for this spiritual community, for this truth, and for this awareness. And I release my word into that infinite law that always says yes. And knowing that I am heard simply because I am loved, I release it into that law. And so it is. You're going to join me in saying our affirmation. I help build a community where everyone belongs.
I help build a community where everyone belongs.
And repeat after me. Something wonderful is happening through me right now.
Something wonderful is happening through me right now.
It is this thing called love.
It is this thing called love.
Love is in my mind.
Love is in my mind.
Love is in my body.
Love is in my body.
Love is in everything I do.
Love is in everything I do.
I am it. I share it. And I receive it. And I move love forward because love lives here. Happy Sunday, and thank you for joining us this morning.